had not only returned, but had changed the galaxy forever. The United Earth battleship Undaunted drifted silently through the darkness of space, trailing debris and venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches. Inside the bridge, emergency lights cast an eerie red glow over the crew as they worked in near silence. Captain James Miller pressed a cloth against the cut on his forehead, watching the tactical display with careful attention. 3 Dominion warships circled his wounded vessel like sharks that had smelled blood in the water. "Status report," Miller whispered into his comm unit, keeping his voice low even though he knew the enemy couldn't possibly hear him through the vacuum of space. It was an old habit from his submarine warfare training. In space, like under the ocean, silence meant survival. "Engineering here," Chief Engineer Robert Torres responded quietly. "Main reactor is running at 5%, just enough to maintain life support. We're venting plasma to make it look like we're about to have a containment failure. They should be buying it." Miller nodded to himself. The Undaunted was playing dead, and doing it convincingly. The surprise attack from the Dominion fleet had caught them off guard, but not as off guard as they wanted the enemy to think. They had taken some real hits, yes. The port side of the ship was heavily damaged, and they had lost 2 crew members when a missile had penetrated the outer hull. But the Undaunted was far from finished. "Weapons?" Miller asked next, watching as one of the Dominion cruisers moved closer, its sensors no doubt probing the apparently crippled human vessel. "Main gun is operational but hidden behind the damaged bow plating," Commander Lisa Walker reported from her station. "Missile tubes 1 through 6 are ready but masked by debris. Point defense grid is at 60% but showing as offline to their scans. Whatever you're planning, Captain, we can fight." Miller allowed himself a small smile. His crew knew him well. The Dominion had attacked them thinking they were just another human patrol ship, easy prey for their superior numbers. They didn't understand that the Undaunted was something special. A ship built not just for straight-up fighting, but for cunning. "Old Faithful, give me their shield status," Miller commanded, addressing the ship's eye. A calm voice responded through his earpiece. "Dominion vessels are maintaining shield strength at 40%. They believe we are no longer a threat. Their power readings suggest they are preparing for boarding operations." Perfect. Miller had been counting on the Dominion's arrogance. They always wanted to capture human ships, to study Earth's technology. It was about to be their biggest mistake. "Hull breach on Deck 3. One of the bridge crew called out. Miller tensed for a moment before recognizing the coded message. The Dominion was launching boarding shuttles. "All hands, maintain emission control," Miller ordered. "Let them get nice and close." He watched the tactical display as more enemy ships moved in. The Dominion fleet was arranging itself in a standard boarding formation, positioning their ships to cover each other while they sent in troops to claim their prize. In the engineering section, Torres and his team worked with practiced efficiency, keeping the ship's power levels just high enough to maintain the deception. They had rigged the reactor to vent excess plasma, creating a convincing picture of a failing power core. The real power was being channeled through backup systems, ready to surge into weapons and shields the moment it was needed. "Security teams in position," Walker reported. "We've got armed crews at every possible boarding point. If they get inside, they're in for a nasty surprise." Miller checked the time. 20 minutes since the initial attack. The Dominion would be getting confident now, thinking the Undaunted was truly helpless. Their boarding shuttles were approaching, and their capital ships had moved into a tight formation that would give them overlapping fields of fire. Against a working ship, against what they thought was a wreck. It just put them closer together. Through the bridge's armored windows, Miller could see the nearest Dominion cruiser. It was an impressive sight. All sharp angles and weapon ports, its hull painted in the deep purple that marked their fleet. The alien ship was easily twice the size of the Undaunted. But size wasn't everything. "Sir," Old Faithful's voice came through again. "I'm detecting power fluctuations in the Dominion vessels. They are lowering shield strength further to divert power to their boarding equipment." "How close are their shuttles?" Miller asked, his hand hovering over the command console. "First wave of boarding craft will reach our hull in 3 minutes," Walker answered. "Second wave is launching now. Their motherships are holding position at 2,000 kilometers." Miller took a deep breath. Timing would be crucial. Too soon, and the Dominion ships might be able to raise their shields. Too late, and their boarding parties would be inside the ship, putting his crew at risk. "Engineering, begin power-up sequence," he ordered. "Keep it hidden as long as you can. Weapons, calculate firing solutions for all targets. Security teams, prepare for boarders. But remember, we want to spring this trap before they get inside if possible." The next 2 minutes seemed to stretch forever as the crew waited silently. Miller could feel the tension on the bridge, see it in the way his officers gripped their stations. The Undaunted had played dead before, had used this tactic successfully against pirates and raiders, but never against a force this size. "Boarding shuttles, 1 minute to contact," Walker reported. "Their ships are holding steady. Shield strength down to 20%. Old Faithful, start your countdown," Miller commanded. "Engineering, be ready on my mark." The AI's voice began counting down in his ear as Miller watched the enemy ships on his display. The Dominion vessels had arranged themselves in a perfect triangle, their boarding shuttles moving between them toward the Undaunted. It was textbook military procedure, and that made it predictable. 30 seconds, Old Faithful announced. Miller's fingers tightened on his chair's armrests. Around him, his bridge crew tensed, ready for action. 20 seconds. In engineering, Torres had his hand on the main power control, ready to give the reactor everything it had. 10 seconds. The first boarding shuttle was almost touching the Undaunted's hull. 5, 4, 3. Miller took one last look at the tactical display, confirming the enemy's positions. 2, 1. Now. Miller's voice cracked like a whip across the ship's comm system. "All power to weapons. Spring the trap." The Undaunted came to life like a wounded animal suddenly revealing its full strength. Emergency lights switched to full brightness, and the ship's reactor roared from 5% to maximum output in seconds. Shield generators that had been playing dead snapped back online, and weapon ports hidden beneath battle damage opened like the teeth of a predator. "Targets locked," Walker shouted. Main gun charged and ready. "Fire everything," Miller ordered. "Show them what a dead ship can do." The Undaunted's response was devastating. The main gun, concealed beneath damaged bow plating, erupted with a stream of plasma that caught the nearest Dominion cruiser completely by surprise. At the same time, missile tubes that had been masked by debris launched their payloads, sending dozens of warheads streaking toward the enemy formation. The Dominion ships, their shields low and their weapons powered down for boarding operations, had no time to respond. The first cruiser's hull cracked under the Undaunted's main gun, while missiles slammed into the other vessels. The boarding shuttles, caught between the ships, scattered in panic. On the bridge, Miller watched with grim satisfaction as his trap was sprung. The Undaunted wasn't just fighting back, it was turning the tables on an enemy that had thought victory was certain. As alarms blared on the Dominion ships and their crews scrambled to battle stations, Miller knew that this was just the beginning. The real fight was about to start. And this time, the Undaunted would have the advantage. The bridge of the Undaunted shook as enemy fire started hitting their shields. The Dominion fleet had recovered from their initial shock and was fighting back. Captain Miller held onto his command chair, watching as energy beams and missiles crisscrossed the space between the ships. Shields holding at 70%. Walker reported, her fingers dancing across her console as she coordinated their defenses. "The enemy is regrouping, but their formation is broken." Miller nodded grimly. Their surprise attack had worked perfectly, but now came the hard part. The Undaunted was still outnumbered, and the Dominion ships were larger and more heavily armed. They would need more than just surprise to win this fight. "Old Faithful, analyze their damage and find me a weak point," Miller ordered as he studied the tactical display. The first Dominion cruiser was trailing debris from where their main gun had hit it, but it wasn't out of the fight yet. "Engineering, how are we looking?" Miller called over the comm. The ship shuddered again as another volley of enemy fire impacted their shields. "Reactors running hot but stable," Torres answered. The engineering deck was filled with the sound of machinery working at full power. "We can't take too many more hits like that, though. The patch jobs we did earlier weren't meant for a prolonged fight." A warning light flashed on Miller's display. One of the Dominion ships was moving to flank them, trying to get an angle on their damaged port side. Miller had been expecting this. It was standard Dominion tactics to target visible damage. "Helm, roll 30 degrees port," he ordered. "Let's keep our strongest shields toward them. Walker, target their engines when they come around. Let's see how they like being crippled." The Undaunted moved with surprising grace for a wounded ship, turning to face the threat. As the Dominion cruiser came into view, the human vessel's weapons opened up. Lightning-like beams of energy struck the alien ship's engine section, causing explosions to bloom in the vacuum of space. "Direct hit," Walker called out. "Their power output is dropping." But there was no time to celebrate. The other two Dominion ships were pressing their attack, launching waves of missiles at the Undaunted. The space around the human ship lit up as point defense lasers shot down incoming projectiles, but some got through. "Shields down to 50%, Old Faithful reported calmly. "Hull stress increasing on decks 4 through 7. In engineering, Torres and his team worked frantically to keep their systems running. The chief engineer moved from station to station, checking readings and making adjustments. They had prepared for this fight, but the strain on their jerry-rigged repairs was starting to show. "We're routing power from non-essential systems," Torres announced over the comm. "Captain, I can give you more juice to the weapons, but we'll lose artificial gravity on the lower decks." "Do it," Miller ordered without hesitation. "All personnel on lower decks. Magnetic boots only from here on out." The crew felt the change immediately as gravity failed in sections of the ship. They had trained for this, though, and kept working without missing a beat. In the weapon control room, gunners used their magnetic boots to stay anchored as they targeted the enemy ships. "Sir," Walker's voice cut through the chaos. "I'm picking up new energy signatures. The Dominion ships are powering up their main weapons." Miller's eyes narrowed. The Dominion's main weapons were powerful enough to punch through their weakened shields. They needed to act fast. "Old Faithful, what's the status on that analysis?" he demanded. "Analysis complete," the AI responded. "The Dominion cruiser we damaged first has a structural weakness in its power distribution network. A concentrated attack on grid coordinates 227 by 344 would cause a cascade failure in their weapon systems." "You heard that, Walker. Target those coordinates with everything we've got." The Undaunted's main gun spoke again, its energy beam precisely targeted at the weak point Old Faithful had identified. At the same time, missiles streaked from their tubes, all aimed at the same spot. The Dominion ship tried to evade, but it was too slow. The effect was spectacular. The combined weapons hit exactly where the AI had predicted, and chain reactions began rippling through the enemy vessel. Secondary explosions burst from its hull as power conduits overloaded. "Their weapons are offline," Walker reported triumphantly. "They're venting atmosphere on multiple decks." But the victory was short-lived. The other two Dominion ships had finished charging their main weapons, and space lit up with their attack. Massive beams of energy slammed into the Undaunted's shields. "Shields failing," Old Faithful warned. "Hull breach on Deck 5. The ship rocked violently, and emergency alerts blared throughout its corridors. In engineering, Torres grabbed a handrail as sparks flew from overloaded systems. "Port power relays are fried," he shouted into his comm. "Switching to backups. But we need time." Miller's mind raced. They had hurt the enemy, but now they were in trouble. The Undaunted's surprise advantage was gone, and they were taking serious damage. They needed something else, another trick. "Old Faithful," he called out, "what's the status of our emergency thrusters?" "Emergency thrusters are operational at 90% capacity," the AI responded. "And the debris field from our damaged sections. Still in close proximity to the ship, Captain. I believe I see what you're planning." Miller allowed himself a small smile. "Helm, on my mark. I want emergency thrusters at full power. Walker, target their sensors with our remaining functional weapons. Torres, be ready to cut power to everything except life support and thrusters." His crew acknowledged the orders, trusting their captain, even if they didn't yet see his plan. The two operational Dominion ships were moving in for the kill, thinking they had the Undaunted cornered. "Wait for it," Miller muttered, watching the enemy ships draw closer. "Wait for it. Now. Execute." The Undaunted's emergency thrusters fired simultaneously, pushing the ship backward into its own debris field. At the same time, their weapons targeted the Dominion ship's sensor arrays, temporarily blinding them. As the human ship disappeared into the cloud of wreckage, Torres cut power to all major systems. To the Dominion ship's damaged sensors, it looked like the Undaunted had finally succumbed to its wounds, breaking apart in a cloud of debris. Their scans, confused by the real wreckage and the power cut, couldn't distinguish the intact ship hiding among the fragments. "Hold position," Miller ordered quietly. "Let them think we're dead." Again. The bridge crew waited in tense silence as the Dominion ships cautiously approached the debris field. They were being more careful this time, but their sensors were damaged, and they were focused on looking for survivors rather than threats. "Just a little closer," Miller whispered, watching the tactical display. "Torres, be ready to bring everything back online. Walker, plot firing solutions through this debris. We're only going to get one more chance at this." The Undaunted waited in the darkness, playing dead for the second time in this battle. But this time, when they revealed themselves, the enemy wouldn't know what hit them. In the darkness of space, surrounded by its own debris field, the Undaunted waited silently. The emergency lights had been cut, leaving the bridge illuminated only by the faint glow of minimal life support systems. Captain Miller watched through the viewport as the two remaining Dominion ships moved closer, their purple hulls reflecting the distant starlight. "Their scan patterns are getting sloppy," Walker whispered, monitoring the enemy's movements through passive sensors. "They think we're really gone this time." Miller nodded slowly. The Dominion ships were being cautious, but their guard was dropping. The first ship they'd crippled had retreated from the battle, trailing atmosphere and debris. Now the remaining two were searching for survivors, their weapons powered down to divert energy to their scanning equipment. "Old Faithful," Miller spoke quietly, "calculate how much of their sensor capability we damage." "Their primary sensor arrays are operating at approximately 40% efficiency," the AI responded. "They are compensating with secondary systems, but the debris field is creating significant interference." In engineering, Torres and his team worked in near-total darkness, using only hand lights to check their systems. The chief engineer kept one eye on the power readings. Everything was ready to surge back to life at a moment's notice, but timing would be crucial. "Captain," Torres called over the comm, keeping his voice low despite knowing the enemy couldn't hear them. "The reactor's heat is building up. We can't stay powered down much longer without venting." Miller checked the tactical display. The Dominion ships had split up, each one taking a different approach vector through the debris field. It wasn't perfect, but it might be their best chance. "Walker, target the nearest ship. Old Faithful, mark any debris large enough to provide cover for a firing solution. Torres, begin power-up sequence, but keep it as quiet as possible." The crew moved with practiced efficiency, preparing for action. In the weapon control room, gunners adjusted their targeting systems, using the larger pieces of debris as reference points. The Undaunted's main gun, still hidden behind damaged hull plating, aligned itself with microscopic movements. "Sir," Walker reported, "the closer ship is almost in perfect position. But if we take it out, the other one will have a clear shot at our port side." "Then we'll have to take them both," Miller said firmly. "Old Faithful, do we have enough functional missiles for a synchronized attack?" "Affirmative, Captain. 4 missile tubes remain operational. With proper timing, we can target both vessels simultaneously." Miller leaned forward in his chair, studying the enemy positions. The Dominion ships were still searching methodically, their powerful lights sweeping through the debris field. One beam passed just meters from the Undaunted's hull, but the scattered wreckage kept them hidden. "All hands," Miller broadcast across the ship's internal comm. "Prepare for immediate action. Engineering, be ready to give us everything you've got. Weapon crews, stand by." The crew tensed, ready to spring their trap once again. The closer Dominion ship was now less than a kilometer away, its massive hull casting shadows through the debris field. The second ship had moved to a position almost directly opposite, creating a crossfire zone where they expected to find survivors. "Torres," Miller called. "Status. Ready to go hot, Captain. But we'll only have about 30 seconds at full power before the damaged systems start to fail. 30 seconds is all we need. Walker, are your firing solutions ready?" "Yes, sir." Main gun targeted on the near ship. Missiles split between both targets. "Point defense is ready for their counterattack." Miller took a deep breath. Everything hinged on the next few moments. If they timed this wrong, or if the Dominion ships were better prepared than they appeared, the Undaunted would be a sitting target. "Old Faithful, start the countdown. Mark our targets and coordinate with Walker." "On my signal." The bridge crew held their breath as they watched the enemy ships draw closer. The debris field around them shifted slightly as the Dominion vessel's engines disturbed the scattered wreckage. A piece of hull plating drifted past the bridge viewport, momentarily blocking their view. "Now," Miller ordered, "full power. Hit them hard." The Undaunted burst into life, like a phoenix rising from its own ashes. Emergency power flooded back into all systems as Torres threw everything the reactor had into weapons and shields. The debris field around them scattered as their engines ignited, revealing the very much alive warship at its heart. The main gun fired first, its energy beam cutting through space to strike the nearest Dominion ship before it could raise its shields. The blast tore through their lightly armored sensor section, destroying their ability to track targets effectively. At the same time, missiles streaked from the Undaunted's tubes, half heading for each enemy vessel. The Dominion ships, caught completely off guard, tried to react. The further ship managed to raise partial shields, but the closer one was still reeling from the main gun hit. Direct hits on both targets, Walker shouted as explosions bloomed across both enemy vessels. Near ship has lost power to their weapons. Far ship's shields are failing. But the Dominion crews weren't done yet. The further ship, despite its damaged shields, managed to bring its weapons online. Energy beams lanced out toward the Undaunted, some missing wildly due to their damaged sensors, others striking home. "Shields holding," Old Faithful reported, "but power consumption is exceeding safe levels." In engineering, Torres fought to keep their systems stable as warnings flashed across his displays. "Captain, we're pushing too hard. The reactor can't take much more." Miller gripped his chair as another hit rocked the ship. They had hurt both enemy vessels, but neither was out of the fight yet. They needed to press their advantage while they still had power. "Walker, concentrate everything on the near ship. If we can take it out quickly, we can deal with the other one." The Undaunted's weapons spoke again, pouring fire into the closer Dominion vessel. Without functioning sensors or shields, the enemy ship took massive damage. Explosions rippled along its hull as internal systems overloaded. "Enemy ship is breaking up," Walker reported triumphantly. "They're abandoning ship." But their victory was short-lived. The other Dominion vessel, seeing its companion destroyed, launched a desperate attack. A barrage of missiles emerged from its tubes, followed by a massive energy blast from its main weapon. "Incoming," Walker shouted. "Too many to shoot down. Race for impact," Miller ordered. "Torres, give us everything you've got to the shields." The Undaunted shuddered violently as multiple hits struck home. Warning alarms blared throughout the ship as systems began to fail under the strain. "Shields critical," Old Faithful announced. "Hull breaches on multiple decks. Reactor stability failing." Miller held onto his chair as the ship bucked beneath him. They had destroyed one enemy ship and severely damaged another, but now they were running out of tricks. As emergency teams rushed to contain the damage, he knew they needed one more miracle to survive this fight. The remaining Dominion ship loomed in their viewport, its weapons charging for another salvo. The Undaunted's crew worked frantically to keep their systems online, knowing that the next few moments would determine whether their daring strategy ended in victory or destruction. The bridge of the Undaunted was filled with smoke from burned-out control panels as damage reports flooded in from all decks. Captain Miller wiped sweat from his face, studying the tactical display through the haze. The remaining Dominion warship was moving in for the kill, its weapons charged for another devastating attack. "Status report," Miller called out, his voice hoarse from breathing the acrid smoke. "Main gun offline," Walker responded, working frantically at her damaged console. 2 missile tubes still operational, but we're almost out of ammunition. Shields are down to 15%. From engineering, Torres's voice crackled over the damaged comm system. "Captain, the reactor's containment field is starting to fluctuate. We got maybe 5 minutes before we have to shut it down, or risk a breach." Miller nodded grimly. They had destroyed one enemy ship and forced another to retreat, but the last Dominion vessel was still fighting strong. They needed something else, another way to turn the tables. "Old Faithful, give me options," he ordered, watching as the enemy ship maneuvered through the debris field their battle had created. Analysis complete, the AI responded after a moment. "The enemy vessel's attacks have depleted their primary power cells by an estimated 70%. They are diverting power from non-essential systems to maintain weapon charge." Miller's eyes narrowed. That was interesting. What about their life support systems? Significantly reduced power flow detected in their environmental controls. They are prioritizing offensive capabilities over crew comfort. A plan began forming in Miller's mind. It was risky, maybe even crazy, but they were out of conventional options. "Torres," he called over the comm, "can you give me one more burst of power to the engines?" "Everything we've got left. The reactor's barely holding together as it is," Torres warned. "One big push might be enough to crack the containment field, but we could probably manage it. Once." Miller turned to his helm officer. "Plot me a course straight at their bridge section. Close range, point blank." The bridge crew looked at him in shock. Walker spoke up first. "Sir, at that range, their weapons will tear us apart." "Maybe," Miller agreed, "but they'll have to survive their own environmental systems failing first. Old Faithful, prepare to transmit a wide-spectrum electromagnetic pulse the moment we're within range. Target their life support controls specifically." Understanding dawned on Walker's face. They've diverted power from life support. If we can overload those systems, the sudden pressure changes will force them to either restore power to environmental controls or watch their crew suffocate, Miller finished. And they can't do that without reducing power to their weapons. It was a desperate gamble, but everyone on the bridge knew they were out of alternatives. The Undaunted was too damaged to win a conventional fight, but they might just be able to force the enemy into an impossible choice. "All hands," Miller broadcast throughout the ship, "secure all compartments and prepare for extreme maneuvers. This is going to get rough." The crew rushed to comply, strapping themselves into crash positions and sealing emergency bulkheads. In engineering, Torres and his team worked frantically to coax one last burst of power from their failing reactor. "Enemy ship is charging weapons," Walker reported tensely. They're expecting us to try to run." Miller allowed himself a grim smile. "That's exactly what they would do in our position. Helm, on my mark. Take us right down their throat. Torres, be ready with that power surge. Old Faithful, charge the EMP." The damaged Undaunted drifted for a moment, appearing to still be reeling from the last attack. The Dominion ship moved closer, its main gun blowing, as it prepared to deliver the killing blow. "Now," Miller ordered, "full power to engines. Take us in." The Undaunted's engines flared to life with a burst of power that made the whole ship groan. The sudden acceleration caught the Dominion ship off guard as the human vessel charged straight toward them instead of retreating. "Enemy firing!" Walker shouted as energy beams lanced out from the Dominion ship. Several hits struck home, but the Undaunted didn't slow down. Their remaining shields flickered and died under the assault, but they were already too close, moving too fast. "Point defense is gone," Walker reported as more systems failed. "Hull breaches on decks 3 through 6. Stay with it," Miller ordered, holding onto his chair as the ship shuddered around them. "Torres, how's the reactor?" "Containment field is failing," the engineer shouted back. "We've got seconds at best." The space between the ships vanished rapidly as the Undaunted charged forward. The Dominion vessel tried to retreat, but they were too slow to avoid the collision course. "In range," Old Faithful announced. Initiating electromagnetic pulse. A massive surge of energy erupted from the Undaunted systems, directed straight at the Dominion ship's environmental controls. The pulse, amplified by the failing reactor's power, hit them like a hammer. The effect was immediate. Warning lights blazed across the enemy ship as their delicately balanced power systems went haywire. Atmosphere began venting from multiple decks as their life support systems crashed. Direct hit to their environmental controls. Walker called out triumphantly. "They're losing atmosphere throughout their ship. Their weapon power is dropping." The Dominion ship's main gun powered down as they desperately diverted energy to restore their life support systems. It was exactly what Miller had gambled on. Even the enemy wasn't willing to sacrifice their entire crew just to destroy one human vessel. "Bring us alongside," Miller ordered. "Target their engine section with our remaining missiles. Let's make sure they can't change their minds." The Undaunted's last missiles streaked out, striking the Dominion ship's engines while they were vulnerable. Secondary explosions rippled along their hull as power conduits overloaded. "Enemy weapons are offline," Old Faithful reported. "They are transmitting a surrender signal." A cheer went up from the bridge crew, but Miller wasn't celebrating yet. "Torres, reactor status." "Not good, Captain," the engineer replied grimly. "That last push cracked the containment field. We need to power down now, or we'll lose the whole system." Miller nodded. They had won, but the victory had come at a heavy cost. The Undaunted was barely holding together, its systems failing one by one as the damage took its toll. "Send word to the Dominion ship," he ordered. "Tell them to prepare for boarding. We'll need their help to keep both our ships from falling apart." He turned to his crew with a tired smile. "Well done, everyone. We just proved that it's not the size of the ship that matters. It's how clever you are with what you've got." As emergency teams worked to stabilize their failing systems, the crew of the Undaunted could finally take a moment to appreciate what they'd accomplished. They had taken on 3 enemy ships, each one larger and more powerful than their own, and emerged victorious through cunning and determination. The Dominion had learned a valuable lesson today. Never assume a human ship is destroyed until you're absolutely certain. Sometimes, playing dead was just the first step in a deadly trap. 2 days after the battle, the Undaunted limped through space alongside its captured prize, the Dominion warship now under human control. Captain Miller stood on his damaged bridge, watching repair teams work to replace burned-out systems while they made their way back to the nearest human space station. "Damage report from engineering, sir," Walker said, handing him a tablet. She had a bandage on her arm from where falling debris had caught her during the fight, but she was still at her post. Miller scrolled through the report, noting the extensive list of repairs needed. The Undaunted had taken more damage in this one battle than in all its previous engagements combined. But they had survived, and they had won. "How's Torres doing with the reactor?" he asked, looking up from the report. Still cursing in 3 different languages, Walker replied with a small smile. "But he says we can maintain current speed without risking a containment breach. The Dominion engineers are actually helping. Turns out they're impressed by how we managed to keep fighting with such extensive damage." Miller nodded, remembering how the enemy crew had reacted when they first came aboard as prisoners. They had expected to find a much larger crew, more advanced systems, secret weapons. Instead, they found a small but resourceful human crew that had beaten them through clever tactics and sheer determination. "Old Faithful," Miller called out, "what's the status of our guests?" "The Dominion crew is cooperating fully," the AI responded. "Their captain has been particularly interested in studying our tactical logs. I believe he is trying to understand how we managed to deceive them so effectively." That brought a smile to Miller's face. The Dominion had always believed in overwhelming force, in bigger ships and stronger weapons. The idea that a smaller vessel could defeat them through deception had shaken their confidence. A junior officer approached with another report. "Sir, we've decoded more of their tactical database. You'll want to see this. It looks like they were planning a major offensive against 3 of our outer colonies." Miller took the report, his expression growing serious as he read. The information they had captured was invaluable. The Dominion had been preparing for a surprise attack that could have cost thousands of lives. Instead, their plans were now in human hands, and 3 of their most powerful ships were out of action. "Send this to command immediately," he ordered, "and get me a secure channel to Admiral Thompson. He needs to know what we found." As the crew worked to establish the communication link, Miller walked to the viewport. From here, he could see the extent of the damage to his ship. The Undaunted's hull was scarred and burned, with makeshift patches covering the worst breaches. But she was still flying, still fighting, just like her crew. "Channel established, sir," Walker called out. "Admiral Thompson is waiting." The Admiral's hologram appeared on the bridge, his expression a mixture of concern and pride. "Captain Miller, I've received 12 different reports about your engagement with the Dominion fleet. Each one seemed more incredible than the last." "All true, sir," Miller replied. "Though I suspect some of them left out the part where we were almost blown to pieces, several times." Thompson nodded gravely. "The important thing is you survived. And more than that, you've given us a tactical advantage we desperately needed. The Dominion has always relied on their superior numbers and firepower. You just proved they're not invincible." "It wasn't just me, sir," Miller said, looking around at his crew. "Every person on this ship contributed to our survival, and Old Faithful's calculations were crucial to our success. Speaking of which," the Admiral continued, "we're implementing your tactics into our standard training procedures. The Miller Maneuver, they're calling it. Playing dead to draw in a superior force, then striking when their guard is down." Miller shook his head with a slight smile. "Oldest trick in the book, sir. We just adapted it for space warfare." "Sometimes the old tricks are the best ones," Thompson replied, "especially when the enemy has forgotten to watch out for them. The Dominion won't make that mistake again, which means they'll be more cautious in future engagements. That works to our advantage." A warning light flashed on one of the bridge consoles, drawing Miller's attention. "Excuse me, Admiral. Torres needs me in engineering." "Go ahead, Captain, but when you reach Station 7, I want a full briefing. The other ship captains need to hear this story firsthand." A hologram flickered out, and Miller made his way through the damaged corridors of his ship. Repair crews worked everywhere, human and Dominion engineers working side by side to keep both vessels running. It was an odd sight, but a hopeful one. In engineering, Torres was elbow-deep in a damaged power conduit, working alongside a Dominion technician. The enemy engineer was explaining something about their power distribution systems, showing Torres how they managed to channel such massive energy loads. "Captain," Torres called out when he saw Miller. "You need to see this. Their technology isn't actually more advanced than ours. It's just built on a bigger scale. But our systems are more efficient, more adaptable." Miller watched as the two engineers continued their work, sharing knowledge that could benefit both sides. Maybe that was the real victory here, not just defeating the enemy, but learning from them. "Sir," Walker's voice came over the comm. "We're picking up a distress signal. One of our patrol ships is under attack from raiders." Miller didn't hesitate. "How far?" 2 hours at current speed. "But Captain, the Undaunted is in no shape for another fight." "No," Miller agreed, "but we have something better." He looked at the Dominion ship flying alongside them. "Tell our new friends it's time to prove their good faith. Let's show those raiders what happens when humanity and the Dominion work together." As orders were relayed and courses plotted, Miller felt a surge of pride. The Undaunted was damaged, but not defeated. Her crew was tired but not broken. And they had done more than just win a battle. They had shown that superior numbers and firepower weren't everything. Courage, cleverness, and determination could overcome any odds. The stars streaked past as both ships adjusted course toward the distress signal. The Undaunted might be limping, but she was still in the fight. And now she had taught both friends and enemies an important lesson. Never underestimate a human ship, no matter how badly damaged it might appear. Because sometimes playing dead was just the beginning of the fight. And humanity would never stop fighting, never stop innovating, never stop finding new ways to overcome impossible odds. That was their real strength, and no enemy in the galaxy could take that away from them.